we're going to take a look at this lesson. It's the maze 6.2.2. So we're going to quickly read it. Again, this maze isn't difficult to solve. The real challenge is getting through it in record number of calls to the on-hold key. Hold down the arrow keys on the keyboard to move the circle around and increase the score. Notice how lose message displays when you hit a wall. That'll be easy for me. Watch me get that. Bam. Okay, did that. And then notice how win message displays when you get through the entire maze. That's a little harder. Press R to restart. So I hit R and I'm back here. I'm going to try this twice. And if I don't get to the end, then you can just take my word on it that it says you win when you get to the end. Oh, so exciting. It's usually around here I die, which is not any but more difficult or less, but all right, I think I'm going to do it. Okay, good. Okay, so those are the events that happen in the game. So let's take a look at the coding. So if you look, they've given us a lot of code. So I'm going to drop down here, and it looks like there's two custom functions that are missing code, and they've dropped the comments in here for this. But I'm going to go back up and see what they have given us, okay? Giving us a background and steps per second. They've changed from the default. And then here's the maze. Wonderfully, they've grouped the maze into a single name for us. So we don't have to go about talking about each specific part of the maze, which is nice. Then there's a label that gives you at the very beginning. If we go to restart this game, move the arrow keys up and down. Okay, that's down here at the bottom. And then there's something called player, which is the circle, which we assume is this person here. Player score, which is a label who looks like he's just sitting inside of the circle. And then there is a custom feature here that says game over is false. So that's good. That might fall into play here. There's an end of game message, which is blank. Okay, so it's waiting for us to put something in most likely. And then there's something called end of game group, which is a rectangle. That's where the end of game message appears. And end of game is visible as false, the default. Okay, so that's a custom property again. Just like player had a custom property, end of game has a custom property. They're both false at the start. And then we have a function. Restart game puts the player at center X, center Y. That looks like that's about here, 40 and 70, yeah. The score is player.score.centerX is equal to player.center. Player score, so some custom properties. Player game over is false. Okay, when we restart the game, that's false. So that was that other custom property sitting here. And end of game invisible is false. Okay, good. So they don't have that big rectangle that when we lose the game, poof, that would show up, right? So we hit restart. And another custom feature, finish game, some message, okay? And then end of game is visible. So that's that big rectangle. And end of game message dot value. Here we go. The value of the end of game message is this piece here. So whatever we plug in here is actually going to give us that value, which if we go back up, will give us, it will put in the label, whatever we want to call it. Okay. So those are those custom definitions. And then we'll look just below to see how the game works. So we're skipping over the two custom functions that we got to manipulate. On key press, if the keys are, we restart the game. Yeah, we're aware of that piece. Whoops, I hit R and went up. There you go. Look, I'm restarting the game. If I hold it, we get a new score. And then on keyhole, if it is up, player center moves up 2, and I lose instantly. And if it's down, left, right, okay, so we know those things move. And then the player score just changes with these things moving here, okay? And then finally on keyhole, so when we're pushing a key, it checks for check lose or check win. In other words, it's constantly running these two functions anytime we do this. So these are the functions that are either going to tell us we've won a game or lost a game. So let's get into this. I know it's a long introduction to it. You should win the game when the player is at the end of the maze. Okay, we figured that out. Hint, the player is at the end of the maze if its center X is greater than 360. Okay, so that's our first hint. And if its center Y is between 300 and 360. Okay. If the condition is true, you should change a custom property of the player and use the finish game helper function. So here's that finish game helper function. And if you remember the custom property of the player, was way up here, player game dot over they called it, which was a nice function there. Or sorry, a nice custom property there. Okay, so this is the player is at the end of the game if instantly tells us we have a conditional statement. So if something happens, and we're going to say if player, which is our circle here, they've named the group player right here. Well, actually not a group, it's just a single function named player. If player dot center x is, and they've asked us greater than, x is greater than 360. Okay, 360. But then there's some Booleans to it. There's some operators we have to add. There's a couple other properties that we have to make sure that are true in order for this to happen. So then what we're going to add is the and Boolean. So we're checking more than one thing. So player.centerx is greater than 360 and player.center y is, one of them was greater than 300, and then there was a third one, and player.center y is less than 360. Oops, that's not what I wanted. What do we want to happen? So here are our conditions. Okay, so we're going to try it with this piece. What do we want to happen? Well, this is checking if it is a win. So it asks us to use the helper function, which was finish game, with some message. So let's do finish game. We're going to call the function finish game, and ISH, let's make sure we get that, finish game, and we want some message to appear. If you remember when I got to the end, it would say you win, yay. And this is a string, so we just got to make sure that we put our little apostrophes so that the program knows this is a string. Okay. Now, I'm going to run this. Any errors in my code? No, it looks like my code's okay. Let's move it around. Now, remember, I didn't check lose, so, yes, I can move right through things. Really, we're checking, are we greater than 360? And we'll use this inspection tool here. 340. Let's inspect again. 361, it looks like the circle is. Okay, and if I go down, oh, here we go. Was not defined. Is not, oh, did I not spell it right? ISH. Oh, camel case, of course. There you go. So I read through this and it said it was not defined. In other words, it couldn't find the function I said to run. That's good news though. It looks like these parameters may be correct. It got to a point, it tried to run this check win custom function, and it got down to this helper function, and it said that helper function doesn't exist, mostly because I spelled it wrong. Let's run this again. We can just cut right through the walls to get a little test here. Hey, you win. Now, but remember in the end, the game stops. My game has not stopped. I can just keep going and going, and you win is there. And I can restart, so that works out nicely. But my problem is I'm not stopping. Now, remember in the hints, it says helper function and use the custom property of the player. Well, recall that we had a custom property called game over. Okay, so let's see if we can change that custom property. We're going to go down. So in this if statement, we're going to change player dot game over to true. That was it spelled right? Should have just copied and pasted it, but player dot game over to true. Let's run this function, and when we do that, let's see if this game ends. There we go. So I'm pushing the keys and I cannot move my circle. So this is good. It looks like I have half of this. The second piece becomes down here. Check if we lose. It is going to look very similar to this. So in fact, I'm going to copy this. But to get you started, we're not looking for positions in the maze. We're looking for if something touches the wall, which is another function we use in this. You might want to think through your hits functions. And we're not hitting specific spots because there's way too many spots to hit, right? All of those lines have all these values in between. So if I was to program each of those or type them in, that would take me forever. There's a better solution. Maybe we want to like hit a shape or hit an object like the maze itself because they've grouped the maze together. That makes more sense as our custom property. Okay, so this little piece, or sorry, in our conditional, not our custom property. So for your conditional, you probably want to hits. Your finish game, you haven't won at that point. Remember what happens when we hit a wall, it won't say you win. It'll say something else. Use something else. And the question is, do you still want to use this game over? Do you want this function to stop? So hopefully that gets you started. So try that check lose. We went through the check win for you. I'm hoping that gives you enough. And again, check for your hits functions. You want a different message to display, and just think about whether you want this to happen or not. I'm going to comment it out in case you don't want it. But if you do, you might want to put that in if you want the game to stop.